All right, welcome back, everyone. This is the recorded lecture for Lab 2, and today we're going to look over the integumentary system, which is comprised of the skin. We're going to look at the functions of the integumentary system. We're going to name and describe the different layers of the epidermis, identify and describe the different structures that can be found within the dermis, and compare and contrast the structure and functions of the dermis and epidermis. This is going to be a quick one. It's only about 14 or so slides, but you will need to know everything for your practical coming up in the next couple of weeks. All right, so first up, we have the functions of the integument. The primary functions are going to be protection, sensation, and regulation. For protection, the skin is going to be a barrier between the internal and external environment and protect against things like abrasions and bacterial infections. Sensation is going to allow you to feel things such as pain, temperature, pressure, and other things of that nature. So think your senses. The integument is also going to regulate body temperature by sweating. It's also going to aid in the production of vitamin D, which helps the digestive system. Next, we see the different layers of the integument system and the various structures that work together. So we have the epidermis, which is the superficial layer of the integument. We have the dermis, which is split into the papillary and reticular layer. And finally, we have the hypodermis, which is mainly made up of adipose tissue and is not truly a part of the skin. If you look at the border of the dermis, you will see the wave-like shape. That is the dermal papillae, or the papillae layer is going to be responsible for your fingerprints. Now, if you look at the reticular layer of the dermis, this is where most of the identifiable structures are going to be located. If you look at the hair, the portion which is above the epidermis is going to be referred to as the hair shaft, and the portion below the epidermis is referred to as the hair follicle. Connected to the hair follicle, we see sebaceous glands that are going to secrete sebum, which is an oily substance that keeps the skin moisturized. We also see eccrine sweat glands that are going to secrete water, salt, and urea. There's also an erector pillae muscle connected to the hair follicle, and it responds to temperature changes. It's going to cause the hair to stand up, and that's what's going to give us goosebumps when we get cold. Finally, we have specialized sensory structures. There is a sensory nerve fiber with a free nerve ending. There is the tactile corpuscle, which will sense light pressure, and the lamellar corpuscle, which will sense heavier or deep pressure. Make sure you guys review this slide several times and can identify each of the structures that are labeled on the image. This will be on the practical. So next here, we can see the different layers of the epidermis. So from top to bottom, we'll go superficial to deep. The most superficial layer is going to be the stratum corneum. This is going to be many layer of dead cells. It's going to be filled with keratin. The next layer is not seen in the slide, but it's called the stratum lucidum. This is what's going to make the distinction between thin and thick skin. The stratum lucidum is only going to be found in areas with thick skin. Thick skin is only found in the palms of our hands and the soles of our feet. So therefore, stratum lucidum is only going to be found in the palms of our hands and soles of our feet. The stratum lucidum is going to look like a thin band of dead, transparent, flat keratinocytes. The third layer is the stratum granulosa. This is going to be a layer of flat cells that present with many dots within them, and these dots are going to be the decaying organelles within the cell. The next and largest layer is the stratum spinosum. It's going to be several layers of specialized cells called keratinocytes. They're going to produce keratin that will help increase the durability of the skin. There's also going to be dendritic cells that eliminate bacteria on the skin. The final and deepest layer is the stratum basale. This is the basement membrane of the epidermis, and it's going to undergo constant mitosis to replace the cells in the more superficial layers. This is also where melanocytes are going to be found, which contain the pigment melanin, and that is responsible for hair and skin color. The stratum basale is also going to connect the epidermis to the underlying connective tissue that is dermis. Here is another slide that's going to go over each of the epidermis layers and give you another description of each one. Just make sure you guys know all the layers and what their function is. That will be a really big part of the practical too. So here we have a cross section of the hair follicle where you can see the different layers that make up your hair. The hair root is going to be the innermost part of the hair follicle. It contains the hair cuticle, the hair cortex, and the hair medulla. Then there is the hair follicle wall that contains the internal and external epithelial root sheaths, the galassi membrane epithelial root sheath, and the peripheral connective tissue sheath. For this slide, just make sure you guys can identify each layer of the hair follicle. Don't really worry about the function that much. Just make sure you guys can know the different layers found in the hair follicle. This is a similar image to the one before, but do take note that there is an addition of the hair papillae and the hair matrix. Make sure you guys go over these two slides and can identify the different layers of the hair follicle. This is a histological slide of thin skin under a microscope. For the practical, you will need to be able to identify structures of the skin on a slide similar to this one. Notice how the hair follicle looks like an oval shape. That's going to be one thing you can look for on the slide. And then the dark pink layer looks like a wave at the top. It's going to be your epidermis. And a lighter pink below that is going to be the dermis. Here we have an image of thick skin. Two things you can look for when trying to determine if the image is thin or thick skin is first notice that there is no hair follicles present since we do not have hair on our palms or on the bottom of our feet. And then you can also see the transparent layer of stratum lucidum in between the stratum corneum and stratum granulosusum. Make sure you guys know everything on these two slides. They will be on the practical for sure. Next, we'll look at the different glands in the skin. There's going to be three kinds of glands we'll talk about in the skin. We have our sebaceous glands, eccrine sweat glands, and apocrine sweat glands. First, we'll look at sebaceous glands. Look at the image on the left, you'll see the cuboidal secretory cells that are going to secrete into a duct that is connected to the hair follicle. Sebaceous glands secrete sebum, which is a mixture of oil and dead skin that would help keep the skin moisturized. So hormonal changes that occur during puberty will increase the production of the sebum, and that is what's going to be one of the causes of acne. And then the next type of gland is the eccrine sweat gland. This is going to secrete water, salt, and urea to regulate body temperature. Eccrine sweat glands are going to be widely distributed throughout the body. So yeah, that's that for eccrine. You can see on the image on the right, you have similar a ring of secretory cells that empty up into a duct. And then the third and final type of gland we'll talk about is not seen on a slide, but that is the apocrine sweat gland. These are going to be highly specialized and in addition to secreting water, salt, and urea, similar to the eccrine sweat glands, apocrine sweat glands are also going to secrete proteins and a fat-like substance. And then, so bacteria on the skin is going to break down these compounds, and then this breakdown is going to cause body odor. And then you're only going to find apocrine sweat glands in the axillary region or your armpit area and in the genital region. So this is just a cool image of the different types of fingerprint patterns you might find that are caused by that dermal papillae. If you're interested in forensics at all, this is something you will work with a lot. Fingerprinting is pretty cool. All right, so that's pretty much it for this lab. Everything I've covered in this video and in the first video will be on the practical, so make sure you guys watch them a couple times and make sure you guys get together and study or study on your own. So as far as this week actually in lab, we will review how to use the microscopes to identify the different types of tissues. So yeah, make sure you guys are studying these PowerPoints, watch the videos, and then make sure you guys are going over those word lists we have on Canvas. That way you can be fully prepared for your practical. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You guys have my email. My office hours are again on Wednesday from 1 to 2 in Belk Gym, second floor. And then make sure you guys are also doing your post-lab quiz. And I look forward to seeing you guys on Tuesday.